Okay, this is the 8mm app, and it's exclusively for Apple products or Apple iPhones as far as I know. And it's probably the best vintage film look I've ever seen. I've tried a few. This one seems to work the best. Mainly because of the grain structure, I feel. It has a grain that is really, really, really unusual. It's soft. It's kind of blurry. Anyways, though, basically this is being recorded with the Apple screen recorder, so there's no stabilization. But there's no stabilization on the app either. I tried to pick a location that had kind of a variety of old and new, colorful, not too colorful, people walking by, to give you an idea of how it will behave. But basically it's a very simple app, probably the most simple app that I've ever used. That's why it's so reliable. For third-party apps, it's the best third-party app for Apple I've ever seen. Filmic Pro is the most famous for filmmakers, but it's always glitching out and having issues. This thing, though, dead simple. It just never quits. So basically, I'm using the Tuscan color profile. That's why it's so warm, complementing the warmth of the Apple iPhone color scheme, profile, whatever you want to call it. And so on the bottom right, you have your Tuscan. You have your two-tone, two-color. I don't really like any of these. The two-strip. I mean, they all depend on. That's black and white, low contrast. It still depends on the subject matter that you're shooting, right? Santa's too brown. 1920s got too many artifacts. 70s is interesting. It's really low color. It's low color, low contrast, and kind of brown. Sakura's too pink. X Pro is sort of interesting, but not really. Noir is cool, but you can duplicate that in Final Cut Pro very easily. It's high contrast black and white. 60s, I don't know. This one, no. Indigo, maybe if it was just the right scene. Like this is sort of okay for that. Like that shot there with the sky. And then Tuscan. Tuscan's my favorite. Usually I take it into post, reduce the warmth a little. Pops the reds quite a bit. I don't know. Has the right amount of grain. Not too many artifacts. A few though. A little bit of noise popping. And then you have these windows in the top right. And you push it and like all of these windows like this. It's just framing, you know. It's generally kind of just annoying. You can cycle through them. I find just the plain window is best, or the frame. This is the plain one. And then what else does it have? On the bottom there's a row of 4 or 5 buttons. One is for mics. And you can shut the microphone right off. And that's audio. And that's sort of a strange ticking sound it adds of the motor of the 8mm camera, and then it shuts it off, and then I just keep it on. That's a light. And then this is just information, tells you what's going on. And then this thing here gets you into the menu. And you can look at the aspect ratio. I keep it 16:9. 4:3 is okay, but it's just a really weird 4:3. Let me just say that. Then your resolutions, 480, 720. I keep it at 720. 1280 by 720, it's a nice compromise. 1080 would work. 4K is just, you're wasting your time because the grain kills all the resolution. So I wouldn't go any higher than 1080. Frame rates, I keep it at normal, which is 24 frames per second. 18's got too much judder. Then you've got this Real Director 2 video editing app. I've tried it. I don't like it. Your mileage may vary. And so the other one is you can do here is there's a selfie. So you can switch into selfie mode while you're rolling, so you can pop back and forth, right? But personally, I think that the problem with this app is you can sort of control focus a bit. Like you can poke on it. Exposure, forget about it. Whether you're shooting selfie mode, front-facing or back-facing camera. It's a gong show. So, yeah, I guess you can vlog with this thing, but there's no stabilization, so forget walking. So we're back with the back-facing camera. And this button here, it's just to the right of the box. This is the one that you push, and then you can get into your photos, and then you can pick a video that you shot with your stock app or whatever app you want to, and then you can run it through. You can follow some prompts and run it through the 8mm app, and it will apply the look in post, which is what I recommend, because then you can get stabilization. However, it converts everything to 24p, which is okay. The only problem is that, like you can see how jerky this is. The only problem is that it only likes certain kinds of codecs. So it will do okay with 60p and of course 24p, but it doesn't like 30p. 30p has tons of judder. See, it really does good with red here. In the shade, it can get magenta. You have to add lots and lots and lots of light when you get into the shade, because it tends to go magenta. At night, like, forget about it. It gets really bad. It's not good for night, but for daytime it's great. And I would say that what you should do is, if possible, shoot with the stock app and then apply the 8mm look in post, stick to 60p, or if you can, 24p. The only problem with the 24p is I've shot some stuff with 24p 4K in the iPhone XS, and it had bad artifacts, flashing of light for some reason. So I have to stick to 60p on the iPhone XS, and I stick to 60p on the iPhone SE, and I'm going to show you some examples that will see. This is kind of interesting. I'm using the iPhone SE, which is a really old phone, but it really works well with this app. I shoot on 1080p 60, it converts to 24p. Better than 30p converts. There is no 24p in this camera unless you go to Film It Pro, and the stabilization sucks. But this little SE kind of does a pretty fair job with this app, you know? And it's got half decent stabilization too. The interesting thing about the 8mm app is it looks just as good more effective on the iPhone SE as it does on the iPhone XS. This is the SE, and it's really hard to tell it between the XS and the SE. Part of the reason is because it's all rendered down to 720p. It's got a kind of a weird, the SE stabilization is kind of weird, it's kind of wavy, but it kind of works for the 8mm app. When it gets converted to the 8mm app, it does kind of a wavy thing. It's not as apparent when you're just shooting video and not adding the app afterwards. Okay, here's the plan. I'm gonna stand right here until someone interesting walks through the frame here, because I like the lines, I like that P. So, how long do you think it'll take for me to stand here and find somebody to walk by who looks amazing? Preferably, they have to walk towards me. That's not good enough. I don't think it's gonna happen. Let's look at some architecture while we wait. This building looks kind of cool. This girl's got a bag that matches the sign, but I don't think that it qualifies. I think it could be a little bit too bright. These two girls are okay, but I don't know. Such is the life of a YouTuber. Let's look at some more architecture. So look at the buildings on this side. Let's look at this way. What do we got this way? It's not very interesting. A lot of bird action. What is with all these birds? What is going on here? I don't get it. Pigeons, I think. Okay, we'll turn around and something amazing will be here. Watch. Wow. Nothing amazing was here. Okay, now I'm officially giving up. Okay, the pink notepad works. It's definitely what it says. The sun is right. The sort of 50s decor is right. It's just like awesome. But, you know, I mean, it doesn't have to be vintage in order for the 8mm app to work. It just helps if it's vintage. I mean, maybe. That's classic. So Chinatown is absolutely amazing for this app because there's just so much color and shape and vintage just about everything. I mean, it's just like, well, it doesn't get any better. You don't always need the vintage look, but it does complement this app perfectly. And I got the sun shining on the right side of the street, so this is perfect. Because this thing needs lots and lots of light and not too many shadows in order to work properly. For some strange reason, it doesn't work with the 4K 24p on the iPhone XS. I am going to run some footage to show you a test I did earlier on today, and it has these weird flashing things. I don't know why it has these weird flashing things, but it does, and it looks really bad. But this is 1080p 60, and it converts to 24 pretty good. 30p, it converts terribly. Lots of judder. 60p has some judder, and of course, the judder on the 24p 4K is really minimal, but you get these weird flashing things. But all these shots are just so cool. And the nice thing about this 8mm app, it has a grain structure. It's this interesting grain, like I've never seen it before. I can't duplicate it in Final Cut Pro for some reason. I don't know why, but I can't duplicate it. It's just soft, and it's just kind of full of grainy goodness. And it's just so hard to like duplicate any other way. If I could just isolate that part of it, that would be amazing. It would be perfect if I could do that. But I can't. Like, just have this grain and not have anything else but the grain. That would be awesome. The one thing that the 8mm app doesn't do that well is faces. Like, I've got a face made for the 8mm app because I'm so ugly, or I'm such a character face, as the movie business would call it. What the hell is going on over there? Oh, it's just an ambulance. But 8mm is okay for my face. For other people who are more beautiful, it may not work so well. But what can you do? So now I'll show you the difference between this and the front-facing camera on faces. This is the front-facing camera. I have no idea what the exposure is, but usually it's higher quality. And the 8mm grain structure, which is glorious, will react differently. Front camera versus back camera. Ideally, I always shoot with the back, or the back camera. I mean, it's okay for completely static shots that are literally locked down, but anything that's like moving, like this, walk and talk, you need stabilization. So now we'll just shoot into the shadows, and it just doesn't do good with shadows. It's just too magenta-y. It does much better in the light. I'd like to shoot a whole movie with this thing, if I could. See here, it's just gonna go magenta-y. Ay. Well, let's also get some weird indoor light in there too, weird temperature. What you see down here, it's an interesting shot, but it's shadowy. I don't know. You just never know what it's going to turn out like when you're shooting the iPhone XS and then applying the app later. You don't really know what you're going to get. So you just take a chance, right? Ah, there, the HDR kicked in. This might look actually not too bad with the 8mm app. It might just work. You never know. There's some bird action here. Can you have enough bird action? Oh, that's a nice picture. So let's see what's around the corner. And not much. my thoughts on the 8mm app at the end of the day, I would say you could use anything from an iPhone SE on up, I guess. Anything that's got some half-decent stabilization, and then add the app in post, for sure. And also, use 1080p 60. 60p converts to 24p, a lot better than the 30p, and also even better than the 24p 4K for some reason. It just does. Forget about third-party apps. Filmic Pro is the best third-party app for Apple. It's really glitchy. It's full of a whole bunch of problems, and it works. You can shoot 24p. It's just really, really, really glitchy. And you're not going to like it because it's not reliable. So I wouldn't recommend using it. But you can anyways. It's up to you. I would say just stick to a regular 1080p 60. Add the 8mm app in post. Tuscan's usually the best. But I have been working up my own formulations in Final Cut Pro to emulate the look of 8mm app while bypassing it, allowing me to use it at night, because at night 8mm app with Tuscan doesn't work so good. Tuscan's the best color profile for 8mm app. Black and white noir is probably the second best, but you know, anyone can do black and white noir in Final Cut Pro. But I'm going to show you a few examples of the formulations I've cooked up that don't do it quite as good, but are close.
I've been thinking maybe I should. I have a couple pieces that I might work on with another user, but yeah, I'm like maybe I'll make it.
Kind of raise out. I was like, this is just okay.
But the big problem with all of this is no content. That's what kills you every time. You don't have content, you're kind of dead meat, you know? You can have all the fancy apps that you want, but your story, those are really hard to find. Unless you're like Casey Neistat. Casey Neistat doesn't really need the 8mm app. I mean, that guy could pick up any camera, tell an amazing story. This is kind of a cool shot here. It's almost too nice, but it's got kind of a nice mixture of this, that, and 5 other things. Okay, I'm just going to wrap this video up with a rant about reality, which is of course the perfect way to end all YouTube videos, right? So, the weird thing about this 8mm app is it kind of raises a bigger question of why apps like this are, why they exist and why they're kind of popular, why film is popular, why film will never die. And it's got something to do with our interest in changing reality, of never being happy with the way things are, and somehow wanting to alter reality and soften it, make it brighter, make it darker, make it more colorful, less colorful. Anything to kind of just change the way reality looks. And I don't know why we feel inclined to do this, but we do. So that's kind of the never-ending attraction to film, you know? It didn't look real. It looked hyper-real. That's why I'm using this 8mm app, because it's got this gorgeous grain and it's got all these artifacts and everything looks kind of weird, and even 24 frames per second. That's not normal. That's not the way our eye sees. With our eyes, everything's smooth, but with 24mm, everything's just like juddery, shaky, and the whole 9 yards. That's why most movies that are supposedly cinematic, they don't do a lot of moving shots, not a lot of pans, do a lot of static stuff. It is just so amazingly windy out here. So yeah, the real story about this app review is why we keep wanting to record reality and alter it at the same time, so that it's recorded in a slightly different way than it actually is. I guess it is a reflection of the way we see and record the world with our eyes and with our brains, I guess. Basically, nothing is as it seems. Everything is fake to a certain degree. And that's the way we like it. We don't like things too real. We want them unreal, because then they're more real. And this app kind of celebrates that aesthetic. So check it out if you want to alter your reality, or